I remember the chill was instant as I keyed into my quiet home, and the silence seemed to swallow me. My parents had left earlier that day, bound for a distant relative's funeral. They'd be gone the entire weekend, leaving me alone in our old, sprawling house. The house itself, with its creaking boards and whistling drafts, had always given me the creeps. The first night alone, I decided to make myself a quick dinner, microwave lasagna, and a glass of water. Simple, right? As the microwave hummed, a cold breeze swept through the kitchen, despite all the windows being firmly shut. I froze, spoon in hand, my heart pounding. Was the back door unlocked? I checked it twice before, but maybe, just maybe, I should check again. As I approached the door, the floorboards creaked underfoot, louder than usual. I reached for the knob, turned it, locked. Definitely locked. Relief washed over me for a moment, but then a soft, eerie whisper floated through the air. "You're not alone," it breathed. I spun around, nothing there. Just the empty kitchen and the soft buzz of the refrigerator. I shook my head, laughing at myself. "Get a grip," I muttered, "it's just the house settling." But as I turned back, the microwave beeped loudly, startling me so much I nearly jumped out of my skin. I took my meal, retreated to the living room, and flipped on the TV for some background noise. Anything to drown out the creaks and whispers. As I ate, a shadow flickered across the wall. My eyes snapped up, heart racing again. The room was dimly lit by the TV's glow, casting long, distorted shadows. I told myself it was just a car passing by, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. But deep down, I felt uneasy. The shadows seemed too deliberate, too precise. Later, I washed my dish and headed upstairs, the old staircase groaning under each step. I entered my room, closed the door, and settled into bed, trying to lose myself in a book. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My skin prickled, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. A sudden crash from the attic jolted me upright. Frozen, I listened as heavy, deliberate steps thudded above. No one should be up there. My parents had always kept the attic locked and the key hidden. Another step, heavier this time, a dragging sound following it. My breath caught in my throat, and I reached slowly, silently for my phone. Dialing 911, I whispered the situation. "There's someone in my house, in the attic," I breathed, barely audible. As I waited, huddled under my blankets, the steps continued, moving toward the attic door. Then, as sudden as they began, they stopped. Minutes later, the police arrived, their lights piercing through my curtains. I explained everything, my voice shaky. The officers searched the house, starting with the attic. They found the door not just unlocked, but slightly ajar. However, their search turned up nothing. No one was there, no signs of forced entry, nothing disturbed. One of the officers, trying to reassure me, suggested it might have been an animal. But I knew better. Animals don't unlock doors. That night, I barely slept, every noise magnifying in the dark, silent hours. When morning finally broke, I was a mess of nerves. Exhausted, I made my way to the kitchen for some coffee, hoping it would help. As I waited for the brew, the whispers returned. "They didn't believe you," they hissed, "but you know, don't you? You're not alone." I spun around, coffee forgotten. The air grew oppressively cold, and I felt a presence, something watching me from the shadows. I backed away slowly, then turned and ran to the living room, heart pounding in my chest. The day passed in a blur of fear and confusion. Every corner seemed to conceal shadows that moved just out of sight. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Look closer," they urged. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help myself. I started to see things, faces in the mirrors, figures in the windows. As night fell again, the activity intensified. The crashes and thuds resumed, more frequent now. Doors slammed shut by themselves. Lights flickered. And the whispers turned into screams, echoing through the hallways, chilling my soul. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave, grab my keys and go anywhere but here. As I reached for the door, it slammed shut in front of me, as if pushed by an unseen force. I screamed, pounding on it, but it wouldn't budge. Trapped, I backed away, watching in horror as the air before me shimmered and a figure materialized. Not quite human, its eyes hollow, its mouth a gaping maw of darkness. "You cannot leave," it whispered, its voice a chorus of the damned. The room temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. I backed away, stumbling over a chair, falling hard. The figure advanced, reaching for me with hands that were not hands, but claws, ethereal and yet so real. I scrambled to my feet, ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife. It was foolish, but I felt I had to defend myself. As I turned, ready to confront whatever this nightmare was, it was gone. The house was silent again, as if nothing had happened. But the terror remained, a tangible presence. I spent the night in the kitchen, lights blazing, every drawer and cupboard open. I wasn't going to be surprised again. But as dawn approached, a final message was delivered in a whisper so soft, it was almost loving. "It's not over, not yet. The story hangs here, unresolved, the terror unexplained, the presence unbanished. What happens next is yet to be seen, but one thing is clear, the house, with its secrets and shadows, is far from ordinary, and my ordeal, far from over." As daylight seeped through the blinds, the dread from the night lingered, palpable in the silence. My eyes were heavy, my body exhausted, yet sleep had eluded me, chased away by fear. Each shadow seemed to dance, each creak a whisper from the dark. I couldn't stay here, not like this. I had to find answers, or at least some semblance of peace. I decided to venture into the attic once more, the place where it all seemed to start. With every step up the creaky ladder, my heart pounded louder, echoing in the cramped space. The air was thick, dusty, and stifling. Sunlight filtered through a small window, casting eerie shadows across the floorboards. As I moved forward, the temperature dropped, the chill wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I reached the far corner where I'd heard the thudding the night before. There, in the dim light, I saw it. An old trunk, dusty and forgotten. Hesitantly, I approached, my fingers trembling as they met the cold metal of the latch. I opened it, and a wave of cold air rushed out, carrying whispers. "Free us," they hissed, swirling around me. Inside the trunk were old photographs, letters, and a small, intricately carved box. The moment my hand touched the box, the room grew darker and the temperature plummeted further. The whispers grew louder, angrier. "No, don't," they screamed. But it was too late. I'd already opened the box. Inside, there was nothing but a small mirror, its surface cloudy and obscure. As I peered into it, the glass cleared suddenly, and I saw not my own reflection, but the visage of a woman, her eyes hollow, her expression one of sorrow and rage. She reached toward me, her hand pressing against the glass, and I dropped the box in shock. Behind me, a loud bang made me whirl around. The attic door had slammed shut. I was trapped. Turning back to the mirror, it lay where I had dropped it, unbroken. The woman was gone, replaced by my own pale, frightened reflection. But then, the glass fogged over, and words appeared, scrawled as if by an unseen hand, "Never alone." I scrambled to my feet, the box forgotten as I pounded on the attic door, shouting for help that I knew wouldn't come. When I finally managed to force it open, the house seemed even quieter than before, as if waiting for something terrible to happen. I descended the stairs, each step creaking under the weight of my fear. Back in the safety of the kitchen, I tried to gather my thoughts. The whispers had followed me, faint but persistent. "Look deeper, see us," they murmured. Against my better judgment, I retrieved the box and mirror from the attic. Sitting at the kitchen table, I examined them again. The box was old, possibly antique, and the carvings on it depicted scenes of what looked like rituals and entrapment. Determined to uncover more, I sifted through the letters found with the box. They were dated back to the early 1900s, filled with tales of loss, grief, and something darker, warnings of a curse and pleadings to future generations to let sleeping evils lie. With each letter, the temperature in the room dropped, the air grew denser, and the feeling of being watched intensified. As night approached, the disturbances grew. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and the lights flickered erratically. Then came the apparitions, more vivid than before. Shadows took form, figures of people, translucent and tormented, wandering through the hallways, their faces twisted in sorrow. One apparition, a tall figure in a dark cloak, stood out. It approached me slowly, its face obscured by shadow. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of the dead. "You have awakened them, and so you must atone," it intoned. The room spun, the walls seemed to breathe, and the floor tilted beneath me. I stumbled to the living room, desperate to escape the growing horror. But the house wouldn't let me. Windows that once looked out onto the street now revealed only inky darkness, as if the house itself had been swallowed by the night. The whispers turned to wails, the temperature plummeted, and I felt hands, cold and insubstantial, pulling at me. Cornered, I faced the cloaked figure as it materialized before me. "What do you want from me?" I cried out. The figure paused, its head tilting as if considering my question. To be remembered, it finally replied, its voice echoing in the cold air. "The story hangs here, in a home-turned prison, haunted by shadows of the past that demand recognition, and a young soul caught between the living and the spectral, searching for answers in a place where every corner hides a darker truth, every whisper tells a tale of old horrors, and every shadow harbors a soul. What lies ahead remains unseen, the mysteries of the house deepening, the terror far from over." The weight of the air around me seemed to thicken with every breath, as the cloaked figure's words hung in the cold, shadow-filled room. "To be remembered," it repeated, its voice a chilling blend of melancholy and menace. I stood frozen, unable to move, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. The walls of the house seemed to close in, and the darkness grew denser, more oppressive. "Why me?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. The figure moved closer, its form blurring and shifting, as if made of smoke and shadows. "You are the conduit," it said, its voice now a whisper, yet it filled the room, echoing off the walls. "Through you, our stories will be told, our existence acknowledged." I shook my head, disbelief and fear mingling in my mind. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Why is this happening? What do you want from me?" The figure paused, then extended a hand, its form becoming more defined, more human. "We are bound to this place, prisoners of our own unresolved pasts," it explained, its tone somber. "You have the power to release us, to let our stories be heard. The room shifted again, the shadows dancing along the walls, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to moan and whisper. Faces appeared in the darkness, their expressions twisted in pain and sorrow. My breath caught in my throat as I realized these were the souls the figures spoke of, each one trapped, yearning for freedom. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their voices a haunting chorus. "Set us free." The emotional weight of their plea was overwhelming, and I felt a pull in my chest, a desire to help, but also a deep, paralyzing fear. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The box," the figure replied, pointing to the small, carved object still sitting on the kitchen table where I had left it. "It binds us here. Break the seal, and our stories will be free to move on." The task seemed insurmountable, the responsibility too great. But the faces in the shadows, their eyes pleading, pushed me forward. I moved towards the table, each step heavy with dread. Picking up the box, I examined it closely. The carvings seemed to come alive under my touch, shifting and writhing like living things. I hesitated, fear gripping me. What if I was making a mistake? What if releasing these spirits brought about something worse? "You must trust us," the figure said, its voice now gentle, almost caring. "We mean you no harm." Its reassurance did little to calm my racing heart, but I knew I couldn't live with these hauntings, this perpetual darkness and despair. With a deep breath, I prepared to break the seal, my hands shaking. As I touched the seal, the house trembled, a low rumble that grew into a roar. The air turned icy, and the whispers became screams. I flinched, but forced myself to continue. The seal cracked under my fingers, and a blinding light burst forth, enveloping the room. The screams peaked, then faded into a haunting melody, a song of release and relief. One by one, the faces in the shadows began to disappear, their expressions softening, becoming peaceful. The room brightened gradually, the oppressive darkness lifting like a fog at sunrise. Yet, as the last of the spirits faded away, the cloaked figure remained. It stared at me, its eyes deep pools of ancient sorrow. "Thank you," it said, its voice echoing in the now almost serene house. "But remember, some of us are too deeply rooted to leave so easily." The implication hung in the air, chilling despite the newfound calm. The figure's form began to dissolve, becoming part of the shadows once more. "We will meet again," it promised, and then it was gone. The house was silent, the air no longer heavy with the presence of the unseen. I was alone, truly alone, but the peace was tinged with an unshakable unease. The story hangs here, in a house now quiet, the whispers silenced, the shadows banished. Yet, the promise of the cloaked figure and the uncertainty of what lies ahead linger in the air. What new horrors might this newfound quiet conceal? What stories are yet to be told? The house, with its newly broken seals and released spirits, holds more secrets, more darkness, waiting just beneath the surface, ready to rise again. The calm after the spirit's release was deceptive, a silence too deep, unnatural. As I stood in the center of the once oppressive living room, the light from the setting sun filtered through the windows, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to play tricks on my eyes. Though the air was clearer, a lingering sense of dread gripped me, tightening around my chest like a vice. The house might have been emptied of its ghosts, but their echoes remained, imprinted in the very walls. I pondered the cloaked figure's final words. "We will meet again," it had promised. This foreboding had left me unsettled, and I could not shake the feeling that something was still amiss. The house, though quieter, seemed to breathe a slow, heavy breath of relief, but also of warning. I decided to delve deeper into the history of the house, hoping to uncover anything that might help me understand what was bound to happen next. Searching through the attic once more, I uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a dusty, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, but the writing still legible. It belonged to the original owner of the house, a man shrouded in local legend as a practitioner of the occult. The entries detailed various rituals and spells, but one passage caught my eye. It spoke of a binding spell, not just for spirits, but for something darker, something that needed to be contained. The realization hit me with the force of a thunderclap. The spirits weren't just trapped here, they were guardians, keeping something far more sinister at bay. And I had just released it. Night fell as I read and reread the passage, trying to understand the full extent of what I'd done. The house grew colder, the shadows darker, and a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I knew I couldn't leave, not yet. I had to fix this. Armed with knowledge from the journal, I prepared to perform the ritual that would hopefully rebind the darkness. The ingredients were simple yet bizarre, but they were all there in the house, collected by the original owner, perhaps in anticipation of this very moment. As I gathered each item, the temperature dropped so sharply that my breath fogged in the air, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me. I sat up in the living room, drawing a circle with salt and placing candles at 5 points, just as the journal instructed. The wind howled outside, a banshee's wail that seemed to seep through the cracks in the walls, lending a frenetic energy to the air. I recited the incantations, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands. As I spoke the final words, the candles flared up, casting a blinding light, and a scream tore through the house, so loud and so chilling it seemed to come from the very depths of hell itself. Then, silence. The candles flickered out, one by one, and darkness enveloped the room. I held my breath, waiting. When the lights returned, it was suddenly and all at once. The house felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding and slumped to the floor, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. The threat was contained, the spirit's duty fulfilled, and the darkness rebound. In the days that followed, the house became just a house. The oppressive atmosphere lifted entirely, the shadows ceased their whispering, and for the first time, I felt truly alone in the home.